Hello everyone. So in this devlog, I just wanted to go over a couple of things I've been working on since the last update. And those two things are Android support for the game and the engine, which took a lot longer than expected, but it's there and it's pretty cool to have. And the other thing is I finished all the monsters for my game, at least like the unique monsters I'm gonna have, like the models and the textures. I'll probably make some variants in the future. But yeah, and if you don't know, I'm working on a GameCube game that is a mashup of a card game and an auto battler / Digimon World style game. So yeah, let's get into it. I'm just gonna show some of the monsters that I worked on, and then also show the game running on several of the Android devices that I own. And after that, I want to talk about what's next on my schedule, and I have something kind of exciting that I want to talk about that I think you guys might like. So yeah, and also thank you for subscribing. I hit over 100 subscribers, which was a cool surprise because I haven't really been uploading much. So thank you, and yeah, let's get into it. I'm just gonna roll some footage in Blender of the monsters I created. So I created 10 new monsters, and that brings it to a total of 18 unique monsters. And there are 3 monsters for each different element right now. And the elements, by the way, are Ember, Aqua, Bio, Spark, Dream, and Neutral. And eventually I'm gonna make some variants of these monsters to add even more to each element, and so to make sure there's enough variety for your playstyle. And yeah, along with these monsters, I also gave them approximately 2 abilities for each monster. And of course, some variants might not have any abilities, and maybe certain abilities can only be bestowed on monsters with a spell card. I think 18 unique monsters is a good place for my game right now, and I'll just accomplish the rest of the diversity of gameplay through the different variants that I create. Well, that wraps it up for monsters. So let's move on to the Android side of things now. Okay, so here we are on the Ein Odin, or the AYN Odin, which is a great handheld, by the way. But yeah, I added some new performance counters on the red ones there on the top right. And those are GPU counters that show how long it took to render those passes on the GPU. And you'll see, like in the city here, it is pretty expensive. It's getting close to 16 milliseconds. Well, it's getting up there. But here in the battles, it is much more performant because most of the objects in the scene are unlit. Only the monsters are lit in this scenario. And yeah, so it's running really well on the Odin, but that is definitely not the case for all the devices I've tested. And here is some footage of Retro League GX running on the Odin. And Retro League GX, by the way, is the Rocket League demake that I worked on a little while ago using Octave. And it seems to be running fine. Besides a bug I'm noticing where the front tires don't rotate properly. But everything else seems to be working fine. And here we are with the Retroid Pocket Flip, which is a great clamshell handheld device. And it is running pretty decently. You wouldn't really know it immediately because timestamp queries aren't supported on the Vulkan implementation on this device, which I think is a Mali GPU. But here I'm showing off that you can adjust the render resolution now, which is really great on mobile devices because sometimes they have huge resolutions, but it's like a budget device and doesn't have a great GPU. I'll definitely be adding a resolution scale setting in my options menu. It's running pretty good in the arena. Now, this is a Samsung Galaxy Tab A, I think, which is like a budget tablet. And this is really struggling. I think this is close to 1920 by 1080, probably not that ratio, but yeah, you can see the forward pass is really high, but I'm gonna turn it down to 0.5 resolution scaling. And here it's actually at like 10% resolution scaling, and it's running fine. So it's definitely fragment bound. I think in the future I'll have to add some more optimizations to support some of these budget style devices, but for now I'm happy where it's at. Okay, let's talk about my schedule for the rest of the year. In August and September, my goal is to finish the game. there's no way that I could create the game that I had envisioned in only 2 months. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a slimmed down version of the game that really just revolves around the core gameplay loop. There will be no city like I had showed off in my previous devlog. If I do add that, that'll be in a future update. But by the end of September, the goal is just to have that core gameplay, and it'll be a good way for people to playtest the game, I think, and they can, give me some feedback and say if it's fun, if it's not fun, what they think they could do to improve it. And I also plan on adding perhaps a draft mode to the game, which will work more like a roguelike, which is silly, but it adds more replayability and something I want to do. I might not do that, but that's something I want to experiment with. And yeah, that might be where I just end development and I release the slimmed down version of the game and I never go back to it. But chances are I will return, but there's more stuff I want to do after doing that initial core gameplay version. And one of the things I want to do is to improve the engine. So in October and November, I'm planning on making some very important changes to the engine. The first change I want to make is to convert my actor/component system into a pure node-based system, much like the Godot game engine. And I've never used Godot, but I've been looking at the documentation recently, and it just seems like it would simplify so much if I just combine, the actors and components just into nodes. The next big change I want to make is to add a material graph system. And this is going to be a lot of work, but I think it will totally pay off. Right now, the material system is so limited, and it really hinders other systems because I'm targeting the lowest common denominator of all these systems, and it's usually the 3DS because that doesn't really have any programmable shader functionality, and the texture combiner operations are very minimal. So a material graph system would let you author materials in a way that could compile down into TEV states or into shader code. Like for Vulkan, it would compile down into GLSL, which would compile into Spurvy eventually. But this way, certain nodes can be supported on different systems. And so you could make a material that is only supported on a Vulkan system and might not be supported on 3DS or GameCube, but you could always have a fallback material that it goes to if you can't use it. And this also provides just so much more flexibility to create the materials you want. You're not limited to the way I'm using the texture combiners. And it will also probably improve CPU performance because right now I'm doing a lot of logic and checks when I'm binding material to see what states to put it in and what textures to bind and things like that. And when a material is compiled for a specific platform, now it will just have a number of textures, the list of textures, and it will have just the TEV states to be put in. And it doesn't have to do any logic and checks to see what it should do. It just reads it and just sets it. And after that, I want to work on an animation system. So right now, doing UI animations, for instance, is very tedious, and you have to do that by hand. There's not an easy way in the editor to make a little animation or move something and scale it or change the color. You have to do that manually yourself in the code, like either in Lua or C++, and that's kind of a pain in the butt. And a lot of game engines have some sort of sequencer that lets you create animations and play them, and it just makes life so much easier. So I really want to get this in the engine. And this would work for the 3D world too, not just for UI. But if you want to make like a cinematic where the camera is moving a certain way and animations play, this will make that so much easier. So yeah, and this will also just be easier to implement after I do the node system. And the last thing I want to mention is I might consider doing a new particle system. I was thinking at first a graph-based system would be so cool for making particles. The more I thought about it, there's a lot of challenges I'm not really thinking about. I've really only used Cascade and Unreal, and that system had little layers you could put on and different modules, I should say, that you can enable and change. So a system like that might be fine too. We'll have to see. So hopefully I can make all those engine improvements within 2 months, but we'll see. So anyway, that goes to December now. And in December, I want to make tutorials for the game. I want to make a simple tutorial. I'm thinking something like Flappy Bird, something like that. And then I want to make a more complex tutorial. And right now I'm thinking of a Golf with Your Friends game. And yeah, hopefully I'll publish those in December. And then in January, I was hoping we could start working on a community game. And this is the big thing I wanted to talk about. And I think it would be a lot of fun and a great way for people to get used to the engine, Octave. But hopefully we could create a game, like, for instance, what I'm thinking of is like Mario Party. And I could create the skeleton of the game, like having the characters walk around the board and stuff. But then all of the mini games could be submitted from the community. And it could really be, the games could be anything you want. But there would be a system you just hook into, and you say who won the mini game, or like how many coins to give each player after the mini game ends, and a way to query like, oh, which player is which color, or like maybe there are some default player controllers. Like if you want to make like a top-down game, there's already like a top-down character controller. But that way, I think people would have so much flexibility to just make their own games. And obviously, they don't have to be complex games. They can be very simple. And I still think it would be like a ton of fun. And then, we can just publish a build for GameCube. And of course, we can iterate on this indefinitely. And yeah, I'll be there to support people if they have questions or if they encounter bugs. And I can support new features if it makes sense. So yeah, let me know if like the idea of a community Mario Party style game would be fun, or if it makes sense. If you have any other ideas or like a different concept for a community style game, let me know, because I'm like totally open right now. I'm just kind of spitballing ideas. And maybe it might only be me and like 2 other people that work on this community game, but that would still be a really fun experience, I think. And I'm sure there are people who don't really want to like work on a mini game or like contribute art or anything, but they would be interested in maybe just playing the final version. So anyway, let me know in the comments. But yeah, that's all I really wanted to talk about in this devlog. So if you are interested in seeing the next and maybe final devlog for the game I'm working on, or if you're interested in the tutorials I'll be publishing for my game engine, or if you're interested in the community game we might be working on, then consider subscribing. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.